Story 1. We bought the house we currently live in 8 years ago. Sadly, my husband passed away 2 months ago after battling cancer. While we are financially stable, it's been a challenging time. When we first moved in, we started meeting our neighbors once we had settled in. There was a little girl, around 4 years old, who lived nearby. As she got to know us, she began spending a lot of time at our house. We took her on vacations, out to dinners, shopping trips, and parks. She even spent the night with us occasionally. I spoiled her with treats, clothing, and gifts. Later, we got to know her older sister, who was about 10 years old at the time. The older sister quickly started asking for the same things I was giving to the younger one. I obliged, providing them with sodas, snacks, and other food items. Before long, she began bringing her friends over too. This became overwhelming, as I was having to shop more often than I wanted to. Eventually, I decided to put a stop to it. I told her and her friend, who was about 11, that I couldn't keep up with their constant demands. Hoping the parents would intervene, I spoke to them about their older daughter and her behavior. Unfortunately, nothing changed. About 3 years ago, the older girl, whom I'll call R, asked me what I planned to buy her for Christmas. When I told her that I wouldn't be giving her gifts anymore, she retaliated by trying to set my house on fire that very night. I considered calling the police, but her mother begged me not to, saying it would be too extreme. She promised to discipline her daughter, claiming R would be grounded for 2 months and have her phone taken away. However, I saw R out and about the same day and the days that followed. 5 days later, R texted me asking for $15. There was no apology, just a blunt request for money. I forwarded the message to her mother, but again, there was no response. After that, I began ignoring R whenever I saw her. In retaliation, she started throwing things into our swimming pool. My husband had enough and installed additional security cameras around our house. R's behavior worsened. She tried to get her male friends to tamper with the cameras. When we caught this on video, we called the police and showed them the evidence. The boys admitted that R had offered to let them touch her inappropriately if they damaged the cameras. My husband warned them to stay away, saying there would be serious consequences if they ever came near our property again. This seemed to scare them off. Eventually, R's family rented out their house and moved away. However, they returned 6 months ago, and the cycle started all over again. By now, R is 17, and her younger sister, F, is 12. The mother has since kicked R out of the house, claiming she couldn't handle her anymore. R's behavior has only gotten worse. She steals from anyone and everyone, including stores, neighbors, friends, and even her own family. I believe the mother is to blame for not disciplining her earlier. Unfortunately, F seems to be following in her sister's footsteps. She often comes over asking for snacks, drinks, and bottled water. One day, I suggested she drink tap water, but she replied that she hated it. She's also started bringing a friend over. One afternoon, I saw her friend, a girl who lives a few streets away, looking overheated. I gave her a bottle of orange juice to help her cool off. Moments later, F showed up at my door, ringing the bell frantically and trying to open the door. I ignored her as I was dealing with some insurance claims related to my husband's passing. On the camera, I saw F pour out her friend's juice in frustration. F is generally a sweet and thoughtful girl, but she has started taking advantage of my kindness. A couple of days later, F and her friend came to check on me. When I didn't offer them anything to drink, F loudly declared, "I want a soft drink," her friend chimed in, echoing the demand. I told F to ask her parents, reminding her that they both work. She looked shocked and said, "But I thought you loved me." I replied that loving her didn't mean I had to give her things all the time. On another occasion, F's friend saw a food delivery I received and told F about it. They both showed up asking if I had any extra food to share. I explained that we had only ordered enough for our family. The mother is fully aware of her children's behavior. Despite being separated from her husband, she prioritizes buying high-end designer handbags over anything extra for her kids. She does provide them with basic necessities like food, but nothing more. Recently, they even asked me for firewood to heat their home. I refused because it's not my responsibility. Their house uses oil for heating, and the cost is comparable to one of her expensive handbags. I'm still grieving, and it's been exhausting to deal with their constant demands. The mother even asked to buy my late husband's van on a payment plan. I refused because the van holds sentimental value for me, and I'm not ready to part with any of his belongings yet. I don't want to sell my house, but dealing with this family has become overwhelming. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance. Story 2. Cast. Me, my younger sister Molly, usually entitled Not This Story. My younger brother Carito, not really involved. My youngest brother Vivi, also not really involved. Karen's 4-5-year-old hobgoblin, who is our entitled kid. Guy and Lady, the couple that owns the Rottweilers. Frisbee, our cutie Yorkapoo, and the cop that was patrolling the area. Note, we don't own Rottweilers, we have a tiny Yorkapoo. Karen, get your eyes checked. Also, this was years and years before the pandemic started. It was a warm, sunny day, so we had taken Frisbee for a walk at a local park, not too far from our house. As we were finishing our walk and about to take a short break at the playground before heading home, we walked by a couple also walking their dogs, two very big, but extremely friendly Rottweilers. Lady complains that Frisbee's very cute, and we go our own ways. So we're just relaxing at the playground now. Me, Carito, and Vivi are sitting at the bench nearby as Molly is playing chase with Frisbee at the playground, when we notice a mother, Karen, and her entitled kid walking at a distance. Luckily, either of them notice Frisbee, or this story would have turned into those Karen tries to steal our dog stories. The entitled kid is screaming, running around throwing things, and making a lot of noise. We just ignore him since he's not bothering us and not hurting Frisbee. After a few minutes we see him disappear down the trail, where we had seen Guy and Lady went with their Rottweilers, so we decided, hey, maybe it's time we head home in case our parents start worrying about why we're taking so long. We hear a loud scream followed by some barking from the direction of the trail. We see the entitled kid is now running, crying, and has some scrap marks on his arms, legs, and face to Karen. Karen, who wasn't paying attention up till that point, is asking her entitled kid what happened, and we hear, their dogs chased me and knocked me over. The first thing Karen does is look in our direction and storms over screaming, how dare you send your dogs after my son? Ma'am, we didn't do that. Our dog's been on her leash the whole time and your son was over. She interrupts me. Don't lie to me. My son just told me your Rottweilers chased him and knocked him over. What Rottweilers? We don't own Rottweilers, we only have a Yorkie. I saw your Rottweilers when we got here. That's why I warned my son to stay away from you. Where are you hiding them? I'll make sure they get put down for attacking my son. Me. Ma'am, I'm trying to explain that we don't have Rottweilers, but you're not listening to me. Karen spots a police patrol car driving by and waves him down. He gets out of his car to investigate what's happening, while her entitled kid is still crying off to the side. Officer, what's going on over here and why is this child crying? Karen, these brats sent their aggressive Rottweilers after my son and knocked him over. I had to throw myself in the dog's path just to save my baby's life, or he would have been killed, and all he asked was to pet them. We all look at Karen dumbfounded, 'cause not once did the kid even notice Frisbee, nor did he come in our general direction. Luckily by now Molly had walked over carrying our aggressive Yorkapoo Frisbee over. The officer stared at Frisbee for a minute before asking, where are these supposed Rottweilers that you sent after her son? Me? We don't own Rottweilers. Our dog is that one, points to Frisbee, and she's a Yorkapoo. Don't listen to them? They're hiding their Rottweilers around the corner at that trail behind them. Pointing at where the entitled kid was at. Right then, Guy and Lady kinda come sprinting out of breath down the trail, and the officer calls them over. Karen immediately starts backing away screaming, there, that's aggressive beast that attacked my baby. The cop to Karen, ma'am, please calm down and allow me to figure out what happened. He turns to Guy and Lady. Excuse me, are you the parents of these kids? Guy, No, we aren't. We just happened to see them as we were taking our boys for a walk. Officer. So they're not your kids. I'm assuming by boys you own these dogs. Turns to us. And you kids were also just taking your dog for a walk. Couple and us. Yes. They're lying to make it look like they don't own the beasts. The officer gives her another warning look, which silences her, before turning back to us. Where were you when her son supposedly got chased and attacked? Me. We were at the playground and her kid was running around by the trail. Before he disappeared down the trail and out of sight, we were planning on heading home when we heard him screaming and running back out. Lady. He was screaming because he had seen us, started throwing sticks and rocks at our boys, causing them to get defensive and barked at him. When he got startled, turned and tripped before running back here, I ran over to make sure he wasn't hurt, but our dogs were too startled and I had to help calm them down before we arrived. Officer. Okay, thank you, please wait here. He turns back to Karen. So, ma'am, are you going to have their beast get put down for attacking my baby? Officer. Not until I ask you a few questions. But my baby was attacked. Why am I being questioned? Because from what you claimed of the dogs attacking your son, things don't add up to what they just told me. That's because they're lying so their beasts don't get put down. Look at my baby's arms, legs, and face. That's all bite marks from their beasts attacking him. Ma'am, those are scrap marks from him tripping. I can tell the difference between bite marks and scrape marks. Now tell me where you were when your son supposedly got attacked. Karen points to the furthest part of the park. I was enjoying the shade over there. Then why was your kid over on the trail unsupervised and not with you? Well, I didn't know they had brought their beast with them. Otherwise, I'd tell him not to go over there. I thought you said he wanted to pet their dog before they sent their dog to attack him, and you jumped in their path to protect him. But that was after he had run away from them, and the dogs followed him to where I was at. Basically, Karen was trying to say that her kid had managed to run to her for protection, and she scared the Rottweilers back to Guy and Lady, while still claiming that we own the Rottweilers. The officer clearly wasn't convinced and allowed us to leave while making sure Karen and her kid didn't try to follow us. We never saw either Karen or her hobgoblin again afterwards. We did thank the officer the next time we bumped into him while taking Frisbee for a walk, and occasionally Guy and Lady. Story 3. My school counselor is completely unbearable, and I honestly cannot deal with her. She is the absolute worst. She never listens to me and is always glued to her computer, even when she approved my pass to see her, indicating she was free. She constantly takes the side of the other person in any situation and manipulates me into believing I am the problem, even when it's not my fault. She is unsupportive, gives the most unhelpful advice, and is extremely judgmental. We don't agree on anything, and she creates more problems for me than she solves. She is also very intimidating, making me feel anxious and afraid whenever I go to her office. To make matters worse, she is rarely available when I actually need her. The last time I went to her office, not willingly she kept pressuring me to go, was on the day of my driving permit test. I had initially planned to see the school psychologist, but she was busy with another student. As I was speaking to the psychologist outside her office, I looked to my left and saw my counselor. The day before, she had told me to come to her office, but I had been very busy and didn't want to go. Long story short, the only reason she wanted to see me was to suggest joining a group for people with severe, disturbing problems. I understand that some might think she was trying to help, and I can see that perspective. However, this was the day of my driving permit test, and my mind was entirely preoccupied with passing it. This woman hadn't seen me in over a month because I had stopped visiting her. How could she possibly know if I was still dealing with the same issues? The only reason she called me in was that this group had an opening. Is that really all I am to her, a girl with problems? If the group hadn't opened up, she wouldn't have even reached out to me. It made me feel like an afterthought, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being reduced to just a problem for her to manage. The worst part is that I have to see her all around the school, whether I want to or not. She is in my classes, around the hallways, and even in my meetings now. Honestly, can I just have one day where I don't feel like I'm running away in fear of bumping into her? I tried explaining all of this to my therapist during our last session, but she wasn't very interested in what I had to say. Instead, she sided with my counselor and even called me stuck and unhealthy for bringing it up again. Even though the situation had changed, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everyone around me treats me like I'm overreacting and refuses to hear me out. I am so tired of it. The last time I saw my counselor was Monday in the hallways. I was waiting for the bell to ring when she came out from another hallway and, upon seeing me, exclaimed, "Hey, hey, hey, what are you up to?" When I told my mother and her best friend about this, they both agreed it was disrespectful and unprofessional. My sisters and a few other people I've spoken to about it felt the same way. I'm at a loss about what to do in this situation. My school social worker told me I couldn't change counselors. I was so shocked and upset by this that I muttered something inappropriate to myself without realizing it was out loud. When the social worker laughed and reacted, I quickly apologized, explaining I hadn't meant to say it and was just angry. Still, I don't know how to handle this new information. The thought of spending the rest of the school year like this is unbearable. The school psychologist has offered to set up meetings to discuss this situation and potentially mend the relationship with my counselor. But I'm not sure it can be fixed. Our personalities clash too much. We are face to face, but we don't see eye to eye. We approach the world and problem solving completely differently. My counselor did mention that she could help me connect with a girl I have feelings for, which is something I really like the idea of. However, I don't want to feel indebted to her for that. I'd much rather make that connection happen on my own because it would feel more empowering. I am stuck in a tough spot and have a strong feeling my counselor is aware of how I feel about her. She keeps sharing updates with my manager, and eventually I'll have to address this with her directly. This situation keeps evolving every week, and it's becoming increasingly stressful to deal with. Story 4. Let me share a story my father told me recently that perfectly captures how entitled some people can be. My dad started doing food delivery as a side gig after retiring from the military. He served 8 years, and I was actually born in a military hospital during his service. He's a pretty big guy, and even though he's older now, he still maintains that military bearing and discipline. One evening, he was doing deliveries for a food delivery app. It was a busy Friday night, and he got an order from one of those casual dining restaurant chains. When he arrived at the restaurant, there was only one spot left that was specifically marked for delivery drivers. As he pulled into the spot, he noticed a luxury SUV hovering nearby, but didn't think much of it. He had just put his car in park when someone started aggressively knocking on his window. It was a well-dressed woman who looked to be in her 40s. Wearing designer clothes and sporting an expensive-looking haircut. When my father rolled down his window, she immediately started yelling at him about how he had taken her parking spot. My father, trying to remain professional despite her hostile tone, explained that the spot was specifically designated for delivery drivers, which was exactly what he was there for. The woman wasn't having any of it, insisting that she had been going for that spot and that he had stolen it from her. My father tried reasoning with her, pointing out that the sign clearly stated the spot was for delivery drivers only and that there were plenty of regular parking spots available. The woman became even more agitated, declaring that she didn't care what the sign said because she always parked there when she came to eat, and she demanded that he move his car immediately. When my father calmly explained that he was just trying to do his job and would only be a few minutes, she became completely unhinged. Before he could say anything else, she reached through his open window and slapped him hard across the face. What she didn't know was that my father not only had his concealed carry permit, but also kept his registered handgun with him while making deliveries, especially during night shifts. In one smooth motion, my father drew his weapon and kept it pointed low with the safety on just enough to make it clear he was armed and wouldn't tolerate any more physical assault. He sternly warned her that she had just committed assault and ordered her to step away from his vehicle immediately. Instead of backing off, she started screaming hysterically, calling for help and demanding that someone call the police. She claimed he was threatening her with a gun. She positioned herself behind his car so he couldn't leave, all while screaming and causing a scene. Several restaurant patrons came out to see what was happening, phones in hand, recording everything. My father kept trying to defuse the situation, explaining that he wasn't threatening her, but rather defending himself after she had assaulted him. He repeatedly asked her to step away from his vehicle, but she just screamed louder, threatening to call the police and promising that he would go to jail. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers quickly took control of the situation, separating my father and the woman. They interviewed them separately, collected statements from witnesses, and reviewed the restaurant's security footage. When they asked to see my father's concealed carry permit and firearm registration, he calmly provided all his documentation and explained the situation, noting that he only drew his weapon after being assaulted and kept the safety on the whole time. The officers reviewed the security footage, which clearly showed her slapping my father unprovoked. Several witnesses also confirmed his version of events. When the police asked if he wanted to press charges for assault, my father agreed. The woman erupted in disbelief, protesting that she couldn't be arrested when he was the one who pulled a gun. The officer had to explain to her that she had committed assault, and the security footage clearly showed she was the aggressor. They handcuffed her while she continued ranting about how unfair it was and how she knew important people. Since it was a Friday night, she had to spend the entire weekend in jail until she could see a judge on Monday morning. The restaurant manager came out and apologized to my father, expedited his delivery order, and even banned the woman from returning to the establishment. As it turned out, this wasn't the first time she'd caused problems there. She was notorious for demanding special treatment and being rude to staff. When she finally appeared in court, she was charged with assault and disorderly conduct. The judge was particularly unimpressed with her behavior, especially after viewing the security footage. She ended up with community service, a fine, and mandatory anger management classes. My father still does deliveries occasionally, and he says he sometimes sees her driving around town. These days, though, she quickly looks the other way when she spots his car. Story 5. I regretfully got an apartment with what is, in my opinion, the worst landlord ever. This man has the audacity to call himself a good person in court. Let me fill you in. I got an apartment shortly after being released from prison, happy that someone is going to give me a chance to improve my life. This was clearly not the case. All was well for the first few months, then winter hit and the heat went out. It took 3 days to get him to even answer his phone. By that time his voicemail was full of complaints from his freezing cold tenants. He told me the law gave him reasonable time to fix it. We went 2 more weeks with no heat, using our stoves and camping in the kitchen in our respective apartments. When he got his electricity bill, he attempted to raise the rent on the apartments. Obviously, he was not allowed by the city, so he refused to pay his electricity bill, thus denying all of us heat at all. This is where my OCD kicked in, and I went full research mode. I studied every law in regards to federal, state, and city landlord-tenant laws and rights. I found so many violations it was no longer funny but scary. I studied building code. I studied the condition of all of his apartments. This was easier due to the fact I was either friends with his tenants or had gone there to repair damages caused by frozen pipes and electrical outlets failing due to shoddy wiring and so forth. The landlord had pissed off all of his tenants. Every last one was pissed to the point where they wanted to testify against him in court, but couldn't due to the financial hardships the living conditions we were in had been causing. I formulated a plan to get him to repair the buildings he owned. But he had his own plan. January 2nd at 2 a.m., I was awoken by the smoke detectors in the whole building going off. I quickly ran to the back hall because no smoke was in my apartment yet, but I was on the top floor. I opened the door and was greeted by a thick wall of smoke. I quickly ran downstairs after shouting for my girlfriend at the time to get out of the house quickly. I pounded on every door and screamed fire. I got as many people as possible to evacuate, but the floor with the fire no one was answering, and to my knowledge contained children. So I panicked. At this point the fire department was there and began breaking in doors. I evacuated. After the fire was out and the investigation had started, I witnessed the landlord give the tenant of that apartment's sister an envelope containing an undisclosed amount of cash, which was visible to anyone nearby. 2 weeks later, the results were released. Arson. The tenant had used hairspray to start the fire and hid the evidence in a hole she punched into the wall. The very person who had been given money by the landlord. Ironically, she was the only tenant who had paid rent in the whole building because she had started moving in 2 days prior. I had not known she was now a tenant, and her sister and kids had moved out the day before. I looked at him and told him I know what he had done, and I was not going to rest until he lost all his buildings. I then began asking his tenants for their stories about their interaction with the landlord. This is where things got real. He had been accused of everything from ripping off employees, theft, grand theft auto, bank fraud, and so much more. I formulated a new plan. I sucked up to him and made it known I am a computer tech. The landlord had a few broken computers and some printer and network issues. I was in. We worked a deal on payment for back rent. I knew he was not good for his word, but it was all part of the plan. Once I got his passwords and logins, I copied his entire hard disk drive to my portable one. I copied all emails in his business account and printed his financial records on my Wi-Fi printer, which was next door. After I fixed his computers and network, I then went home to review my newfound evidence. It was enough. More than enough. I contacted code enforcement with all of the violations of code for every building, including the illegal electrical installation in his new office without permits or even an electrician. He was immediately investigated. That night, I found a 7-day notice to quit on my door. My roommate was worried, but I filled him in on the plan. Remember, I studied all those laws and rights. Well, we get to court, and I open with Your Honor, I have proof of a clear violation of the Warranty of Habitability Act. The eviction was thrown out, and he was forced to repair my apartment with me still in it immediately. The next month, I was given another eviction notice. Still, he is losing money due to the fact I was teaching his tenants landlord-tenant rights and the laws associated with it. The jerk kept losing his court dates and kept being told to fix stuff, and was continuously fined by the courts and the code enforcement. He was sinking fast. Back to that fire, the woman living there was arrested for arson and charged with 2 counts due to the accidental electrical fire on New Year's Day that turned out to be ruled intentionally. So the hairspray was in reality attempt 2. He was under investigation for conspiracy to arson and other charges. I wasn't done yet. We went to court again for my non-payment of rent. I won again based on the Landlord's Retaliation Act because I had contacted code enforcement and could prove this blatant retaliation, and the judge didn't even listen to him. Needless to say, spending the winter without heat took a toll on us tenants. We bought electric heaters and informed the power company that the landlord had shut off all the power to all his buildings and was requiring the tenants to pay for their own power. Well, apparently his illegal wiring caught up to him. He had wired apartments to run off each other, and the common areas were now attached to wiring in every apartment. This put the landlord in a rough position, as local law says it's the landlord's responsibility to supply power to all common areas. This means his shoddy workmanship and illegal wiring prevents him from legally disconnecting the power. The power company turned on all the power and locked his ability to shut it off until the wiring of common areas was repaired and separated from the apartments. This would cost thousands we knew he didn't have. The landlord was panicking. He kept losing in court. People were legally withholding rent. He couldn't shut off services, and the fines were debilitating. He kept blaming his tenants and refused to repair things. One by one, the buildings were condemned, and the landlord was required to pay for relocation of his tenants by law. Well, he didn't. He couldn't. He was arrested for attempting to sell 3 buildings the city confiscated from him, and for selling one that was condemned. The landlord got what he deserved. He lost every building he owned, got charged with all kinds of fraud, and was investigated for other crimes I am still unaware of. But I wasn't done. He caused a lot of suffering. I gave his financial records to the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, with all the internal memos and everything I got from his computers. Also, I provided the local authorities and code enforcement with the same things. The landlord was so screwed. I have since gotten a new apartment, and everything he owned has been taken by the city, state, and IRS. I have not seen the landlord in 3 years, and all of his properties have been bought by someone new, repaired, and have all new tenants who are happy with their new landlords. The old tenants got better places with decent landlords. And what about our wonderful entitled landlord? He is serving multiple sentences for the crimes he has committed, and is already not getting out anytime soon, yet the investigations are not done, and the charges keep coming. The landlord is somewhere in some prison regretting meeting this tenant. Moral: don't be entitled unless you want to meet the moral enforcer. Story 6. I might post this online, but I'm not sure yet. Just know that if I don't get back to you all, it's probably because I'm almost entirely banned from my electronics. I just turned 18 a few months ago. I'm a male. Between 17 and 18, my parents must have expected some kind of magical transformation. But I'm still the same person. I sleep in a lot when I can, spend time on my devices because they're my biggest hobby, and listen to music like Nathan Feuerstein's in F. They expect me to do so much. But I just turned 18 and feel like I have nothing figured out yet. So, one Monday around 2:50 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. A noise outside my room woke me up, and even my guinea pig was alarmed until almost 2 a.m. I was too. It sounded like something had fallen and banged just outside my room. I decided to walk around while listening to music, hoping to tire myself out and fall asleep again. By 4 a.m., after almost 2 hours of music, I was ready to get back to bed. But since my bedroom is downstairs and there's a straight walkway to the upstairs door, I saw it open and there was my dad. He gets up very early for work so he won't be late. We just stared at each other until he asked, "What on earth are you doing awake?" I tried to explain, saying over and over that I couldn't sleep because the noise woke me up, and my guinea pig was so loud it kept me awake. It still did until almost 5 a.m. that same day. He brushed it off and said, "I bet you haven't slept at all." I had, but I woke up at 2 a.m. because of whatever fell outside my room. I still don't know what it was to this day. I knew I was in trouble, but what came next went further than I thought it ever would. The next day, I woke up totally dreading whatever was about to happen. I went upstairs and saw my younger sister and my mom at the table. "Let's call my sister Jenny and my mom." "Well, Mom," Jenny said, "you're telling me he was up until 4:30 in the morning?" Mom replied, "Yes, according to your father, he was up until 4 o'clock or 4:30. They were talking about my so-called mistake. Sure, I messed up. I should have stayed in my room to listen to music. But my room is cramped because I recently got a new desk that takes up more space than I expected. For the sake of this story, I'll call myself Raider." Mom turned to me and said, "Raider, why were you awake so late? The first thing I told you last night was not to stay up late. You do realize we're going to have to punish you, right? We're going to take your devices." I remembered her telling me not to stay up late. And yes, I messed up. I can admit that. I shouldn't have been up listening to music. But I was in a terrible mood from the lack of sleep after the noise and my guinea pig's constant squeaking. I said, "Well, I own them. I legally bought them. They're mine, and you can't just take them." I shouldn't have said that. I know it's their house and their rules, but I was right technically. Still, that caused some major drama. Fast forward a bit, my parents limited my electronics use. For the past few days, I haven't been allowed to go anywhere not to the store, for a drive, or even around the block. My devices are locked up daily, and I have to earn them back. That includes all my handheld consoles and even the iPod Touch I paid for on eBay. I can't listen to music anymore. Nathan Feuerstein's music means so much to me, and when they took that away, I felt emotionally unstable in ways I couldn't handle. This morning, things got worse. I texted my mom to ask if I could sleep in a little longer since I still have my phone in my room. But at this point, even a flip phone would do more for me, not even joking. That set her off. She threatened to take my devices to the storage unit, even though I explained that the cold would ruin their lithium batteries. My PlayStation Vita isn't built for harsh winters. She says anything more than 10 hours of sleep is too much and might start waking me up even earlier. I have less freedom than my 9-year-old brother. He can at least do what he wants without being watched constantly. I barely found time to type this out. Thank goodness I type fast. Now I have to go to bed at 9:30 p.m., the same time as my youngest siblings. Mom even comes into my room to ensure I'm asleep, invading my privacy. My house feels like a prison system now. In the last 2 days, she's entered my room more than 3 times. It's not like I have a job, a car, or anyone nearby to help me. I feel completely stuck. I just want the things I paid for and a bit of normalcy. Update. I asked my parents at the dinner table if I could get a job application for the closest retail store. They said no. Their reasoning? You need to work on yourself before thinking about a job. A job would help me work on myself. It teaches punctuality, responsibility, and respect. But now, I can't even try to be independent. They also said I'm behind in school, which is partly true, but only for extra classes like typing. I didn't mention my electronics to avoid more drama, but I can't handle this anymore. On top of everything, I'm tracked with an app that monitors my location, so I can't even go anywhere without them knowing. I've even started considering joining the military for freedom. Who would have thought? If anything changes, I'll update again. Thanks to everyone who's read this and offered support. It means a lot.